Oh, I gotta put up a little disclaimer. Hold on. Just so the editor knows. Cool.
Gotcha.
All right, do I look pretty?
Absolutely.
All right, here with Stephanie Huntsman for one of our master classes. So Stephanie, before we dive too far into this, I wanna have a understanding, and I want everyone watching to understand where you started and why you started flexible eating and your journey with Take Eating Back.
Oh boy. I guess if you really want to get into it, I've been variously disordered eating since I was 10 years old. Tried every diet out there, whether it was high protein, low carb. We tried it. But the past year got really strict. Been using MyFitnessPal just to track and keep an eye out because it's a really easy way to do food journals. And at CrossFit Kaizen about 5 weeks ago now, they started a Take Eating Back challenge, and I was introduced to your program and flexible eating. And it was definitely a shift for me in terms of eating all the carbohydrates that we're supposed to eat, because I've been very high protein, high fat, and minimal carbs. But noticed huge changes in my energy right away, and even had 2 weeks ago, 4 races in 3 days and never felt low energy once. But it's been to not have to be as concerned about what I'm eating and still being able to lose weight and increase performance has just been absolutely huge for me.
Well, that's amazing. And even in that short time frame, seeing such a positive change. And one of the other reasons we really wanted to have you and showcase you is you're using this not just, let's be real, I don't know you very well, but I'm sure you want to look better naked. We all do. But you're also trying to improve performance. You OCR, like you mentioned, obstacle course racing, and you have a few other passions as well in the fitness industry, right?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about those?
So obviously, first and foremost, I do obstacle course racing. So Spartan, Battle Frog went under, but anything with mandatory obstacle completion is my ball game. I also fly trapeze for fun. We have a rig out here in Las Vegas, so beginners and professionals are able to come fly with us. And yeah, and CrossFitting, I got into it about, back in March, so a little over 6 months now, and had some pressure to go and compete. So we'll see. With so many of the gains I've been making since starting flexible eating, it's not as daunting a couple months ago.
When you say so many of those gains, give me your biggest and best gain.
That's a really good question. I mean, just to see my squat, I mean, I haven't been, some of it's still that kind of learning and adapting to proper squat form and proper deadlift form, but my squat the other day, 75% at, 165, 175, and it was supposed to be a challenging 5x3 and was getting 5x5 without issues. So really excited to test. I've got a 24-hour race coming up in 2 weeks. So after that, we'll test some maxes. But really excited to see where those numbers go.
Getting stronger. That's an amazing gain in progress, and I'm sure that's going to translate to improved times on an obstacle course race.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we had, a 3K and a 15K and then a team race, all back-to-back subsequent days last weekend. And the team race, I was the strength leg of it, and we had a 1 mile uphill and watched plenty of girls and guys both stop to pause either halfway up, part of the way down, and I was able to make that full trek up and down without a problem at all. And I haven't trained hills nearly as much as I should have leading up to that race.
Well, all of this is obviously working for you, and I want to get a better understanding now of how you've been able to implement it into your real life. So we've talked about measuring and eyeballing, and tell me what that means to you and what your go-to method is.
So I've been comfortable eyeballing, always having been eating disordered and anorexic in high school. It was always what's the least obvious way to tell that I'm, measuring what I'm eating. But I've always been pretty good at eyeballing amounts, a lot of background cooking and baking. I definitely prefer to measure just because I'm a little bit OCD, and I like to know exactly what I'm putting in my body. So it's one of those where I'm really comfortable to eyeball and guesstimate, and I'm reasonably accurate at it, but I definitely prefer to bust out the little measuring scale and weigh every little ingredient that I'm putting in.
But do you feel like even in this short time, 5 weeks in, you've been more accurate when you do eyeball? In other words, when you measure and measure and measure, all of a sudden you become better at eyeballing 4 ounces of chicken or 4 ounces of steak or a cup of broccoli. Do you feel that way? And if so, what does that do for you as far as maintaining this lifestyle?
So I think I'm a little unique in that I measured for probably close to the past decade. So I wouldn't say that it made a huge difference in my ability to eyeball, but I could definitely see somebody who hasn't been for the better part of 10 years, where it would definitely help them to get more accurate at that. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. What advice would you give? So you come from this background of measure, measure, measure. But some people are going to be on this journey and they're a few weeks or even a few months in at this point. What advice would you give them as far as attitude towards measuring and eyeballing? Is it okay to go a few meals and eyeball, go a few weeks, go a few months? Or do you feel you've made the most progress because you have been so dialed in with measuring?
No, I definitely think that for someone who's not as kind of anal about it as I am, that eyeballing is definitely something. I think measuring can be a really nice way to start out and get a feel for, well, your palm's bigger than my palm, so where in there is really 3 to 4 ounces. I think it's a really great way to kind of have a reality check on portion sizes, but I think that reality check translates very quickly into being able to eyeball. So I think for somebody, whether they're new to it or have been eyeballing for a while, I think it definitely is a feasible way to do this. I'm just one of those of the mindset that and it very well may be that so much of the results and the success I've seen are because I measured down to the gram and down to the ounce. But I don't think, even on the days that I've missed my macros by more than 5, I think it's a good demonstration of eyeballing can be just as productive and successful as measuring.
Do you worry that if you eyeball too often, it would open up kind of a Pandora's box or this gray area of, that's 4 ounces, but that's okay that if it creeps up to 5, or a handful of chips becomes 2 handfuls of chips? Is that part of your concern?
A little bit. I think I just like to know exactly what I'm putting in my body, and it definitely can have a tendency to creep up. I think with the chips, it's super one of those, let me, eyeball out or measure out exactly the portion I'm going to have, and then the bag gets clipped and put back in the pantry. But I think it can be good, even to do, people do a recheck with their numbers, just kind of a recheck on hey, I haven't measured, I've been eyeballing for a while. Let me just make sure that things are still consistent.
On this program, have you ever gone through a duration of time where you're primarily eyeballing, or on the road or during these races? Has that been an experience of yours?
Yeah, actually, when I was up in Canada, I brought up all my pre-race stuff. I measured out because, never want to try something new on race day. So that was all measured out, but for dinners and for post-race meals, it was definitely all eyeball, and especially guesstimating, when you're eating out at a restaurant, I don't know, is it cooked in oil or cooked in butter? And you don't want to ask the 60,000 questions of the wait staff. But so there's definitely a fair amount of eyeballing going on that weekend.
So you are committed enough that you're actually staying on the program during these OCR races?
For the shorter duration ones, yes. Most of the normal ones aren't more than 10 to 15 miles. So it's relatively easy to incorporate that in as, okay, so equal to me doing 2 or 3 CrossFit workouts that day, which is a new normal Monday or Thursday for me. Coming up in 2 weeks, I have a 24-hour World's Toughest Mudder out at Lake Las Vegas. And probably won't stay on for, just because when I've dialed in my endurance nutrition, it doesn't exactly fit the macro breakdown, but I know it works for me. So I might more carbohydrate heavy than my last 24 one in March, just because I've learned how my body responds to different things during training, whether it's oatmeal, whether it's gluten-free stroopwafels. But it probably won't be as much of a focus during the 24 hours, and there will be a lot of Snickers bars too.
But it's amazing that you've learned, as someone that was afraid of carbohydrates, that your body actually performs better with them.
Oh my goodness, it's night and day. We started a Strong Fit program at one of the gyms I go to, and our coach had said, hey, before you come in, I need you to have something that's got, 30 grams of carbs, 20 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat. And I was like, you want me to eat before I come work out? And so getting used to that, and then getting used to having a snack with a similar balance between CrossFit starting. I was like, how am I going to eat that much, let alone like, how am I going to deal with that many carbs? And yeah, it's been night and day. Like, I don't bonk at the end of a long endurance workout anymore. After finishing the race, I was 4 hours and 22 minutes for the 15K, and I still was fine within half an hour of ending, which is something totally new for me.
Talk me through that, though, as someone who came from so many different diets and battles in the past with nutrition. What was your mindset when diving into this? Was it just, okay, other things aren't working, I have to believe this guy? Or was it a slow process of adding carbs in? Did you have a friend that did it? How did you finally make that jump?
Well, like I said, when I started with the Strong Fit programming, there'd been some beginning familiarity, and shortly after was introduced to flexible eating. And I'm definitely of the mindset of jump right in with 2 feet rather than kind of ease in, because I know if I eased in, it would be forever and a day until I was actually actually following it. And I remember looking at those carbs for the first few days and being like, how am I going to hit that? And I know a lot of the people with different, not as performance oriented goals, everybody loves their Swedish fish and Twizzlers and this, that, and the other. And for me, that's not an option. But if I'm going to get my carbs from a sweet potato or Swedish fish, the sweet potato is going to be exponentially better for my performance. And then when John helped out with my numbers, because I was ravenous on my 3+ workout days, I was like, wait, you want me to eat 10 more grams of carbs? Like, how is this going to happen? And it's definitely become less of a challenge. He doesn't struggle to hit her protein numbers, but getting me to those carb numbers was really challenging at first.
And at what point, you dove in, and that's really awesome. But at what point did you actually feel that difference? At what point was it, okay, I'm not just trusting it, but now I actually feel and see the change in my body?
I think it kind of a couple milestones. Within the first week, I noticed everything get a lot more regular, if you catch my drift. And then after I added in the couple extra grams of carbs and fat, that's when I really noticed the energy start to shoot up, because I think from where I was originally, just needed a little extra boost, especially for those high intensity days. And I noticed right away that my workouts were I didn't feel tired afterwards. Like, people in the class around me, even some of them who are also on flexible eating, were just completely zonked after a workout. And I'd be kind of like, okay, what do we do next? But yeah, to see how I 4 to 5 p.m. crash when I get into work anymore, energy levels from when I wake up until when I go to bed, and I'm sleeping exponentially better. Across the board, I'd say it wasn't more than 2.5 weeks before I started seeing drastic changes in everything.
That's really awesome that so many people just, they want to do this and they want to do it their way. So the fact that not only did you hop on board, but you did it our way and it worked, because like we tell everybody, we're not reinventing the wheel. We just have a different and better approach, but it's got to be our method and our way. And you're a perfect example of that. If we were to wrap this up, my last two questions are, what would be your biggest piece of advice? What's that knowledge bomb you have that maybe you think other people know that you were able to figure out? It could be about anything, logging your food, tracking your food. This food works here. What's been something that's really helped you?
I think just being consistent. Like, with any food logging, it's being honest with yourself. And at first it can be hard because it's like, oh gosh, I accidentally ate that entire Snickers bar when I was only supposed to have half of it, or, was supposed to have something healthier. But I think just the honesty and being able to forgive yourself for that and adjust your macros to move on. That's kind of the beauty of it, is that, one or two slip ups during the day aren't going to screw you over for the rest of the day, let alone the rest of the week. And then the thing that's been key for me, especially making sure that I'm satiated throughout the day, which in turn makes it harder to accidentally slip up, is being able to plan. The first couple times you plan out your macros, the first couple times you plan out your meals, it'll probably take you anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour. But now it's kind of one of those, like, I get 15 minutes for dinner at work, and I'll sit down, and while I'm eating dinner, I'll plan out my macros for the next day. And then it's all right there in my Fitness Pal. Next morning after the gym, I can pull up, look, hey, okay, I'm not having steak for dinner tonight, so it means I can have 3 whole eggs this morning instead of egg whites and toast. But just having that plan set out gives you those goals to look to. It know what's coming and leaves less room for kind of the unexpected things, which is where things can get sketchy and or hairy.
I think that's great. I think consistency is key, and what you're saying also about planning is, for you it works, for some people it doesn't, but the bigger picture is it gets easier. It gets easier in time. My last question, what does take eating back mean to you?
Finally being able to use food as fuel and have a healthy relationship with it, rather than the constant guilt trips about what I'm putting in my body. A healthy way to look at counting macros.
I love it. I love it. Well, you've been great, Stephanie. Good luck at your 24-hour race. That sounds a little incredibly ridiculous, but good luck at it. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you. Post in the nation. Let everyone know how you did at the race.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you, Stephanie.